my answer to what's the worst thing I've ever seen. This is the third and final part of this story. Before we start, if you enjoy my content, please feel free to like this video and subscribe. The lights were on when I pulled into the parking lot outside the hospital. It was already late. The rest of the building was lit up as usual, but my wing was dark. A pit formed in my stomach as I sat there, craning my neck to see through the windows, squinting, thinking, we were all professionals. It should have never been able to get this bad. For us all to slip, I don't get it. The window went back into forever. Something far behind it was lit. A tiny light spilling from behind a cracked door. Something moved in front of it. I swallowed the fear and bit my lip. I still had to go to work. I had to turn the lights back on. A few people were moving in the parking lot, coming in and out, being pushed in wheelchairs and hurrying to appointments. It seemed like no one else had any feeling of foreboding, of an encroaching darkness. The lights were off in just one wing. I was losing my mind. It was cold and I was still alone. I hurried through the door and towards the first elevator. I always try to avoid looking too troubled at work. Being in a hospital is already a stress-inducing situation for most, and I'm very aware that watching medical personnel with grim looks on their faces can often make that worse. It's one of the reasons why I'd been so frustrated with the recent state of the place. When we were all on edge, so were the patients, and I'll always hate that they're suffering for our problems. Saying that, I know that when I walked through that lobby, I looked like hell. The people waiting nearby later cited seeing me as their first indication that something terrible had happened. How they hadn't noticed anything before, I can't tell. When those elevator doors opened, I pushed harshly past two elderly women who were exiting. One turned back, and whatever she saw on my face nearly knocked her over. I hit the button 1,000 times before the door closed. The elevator crawled upwards, and I stood, clenching my fists, centering. The fog in my head was too strong. I lost track of too much then. I'd been in this elevator hundreds of times before. I'd left my mind empty as I autopiloted into work. I'd never noticed how quiet it was. Everything slipped through the cracks and into the shaft. My heartbeat was the loudest. I went up. A distant sound descended upon me. Constant, so high-pitched I barely noticed it. Growing in strength with every inch I went up. It was no human voice, no pained moans, no cries of fear. It was artificial, electronic, long and piercing and high, overwhelming. It pressed me into the floor of the elevator, and it grew. There was more behind it, pushing through, together, harmonizing. Something on my floor was singing. In my head. In my head. I put my palms on the doors and felt the cold. The doors opened and the song broke. The metal slipped from under my hands and I toppled out into the noise, into the darkness of my workplace. The melody was gone. Now it was only sharp. It pierced me as I crawled out of the elevator, and only then, only when I looked up and around, did I realise what I'd been hearing. The heart monitors in every room were screaming in the dark. Almost everyone in a bed on this floor had stopped breathing. Their hearts had stopped pumping. While I wasn't there, the one time that I wasn't there, they wouldn't let me forget, not while their monitors could scream. It was still dark. I pulled myself up by the receptionist counter and looked with the light of the equipment and the little moonlight coming through the windows. And there was something in my head. The corners of my mind were folding in before I could take anything in. My hands were slipping, my eyes drifting, closing. I took a pen from the desk and stabbed myself in my upper thigh. It broke the spell for a brief moment, long enough for me to stay on my feet and look around, glancing over a floor covered in strewn papers, pencils, medical utensils, shattered potted plants, glimmering pieces of broken glass, a leg. Someone was there, face against the ground. I stabbed myself again. Something hot ran down my leg. I looked behind the counter I was balanced on. Someone was there too, and someone else. And as my eyes adjusted, it seemed like everyone here had fallen wherever they were standing during whatever they were doing. And it had been something. Some had put their hands on each other. There were scalpels and scissors scattered near them. I couldn't look over the noise. They were breathing. Some cut through the incessant noise of the heart monitors with heavy, convulsing moans, gasping, crying for air. But they breathed. They were still alive, alive and in pain, alive and unconscious, suffering with their eyes closed, dreaming. My knees started to buckle. I stabbed myself again. My eyes began to shut. I dug it in and twisted. I walked while I could still feel my sock turn soggy, hurting while I could still move to do something about it. I passed by doors softly swinging and saw briefly feet under covers, hands dangling limp, eyes shut tight, and mouths hanging open. Every one of our patients here had died in their beds while I was gone. The pen broke in my thigh. I replaced it with a sharp end of my fingernail and pushed around the corner. In the back, past the sticky heat in my hand, was his room. He'd still be there, like everyone else. I couldn't pick out his heart monitor among the rest. There was little reasoning to be had with a weight bearing down on me. I stopped thinking and kept walking. Thoughts and feelings can be difficult to recall when in the wake of something terrible. I was there. I remember what I saw, what I touched, but something in that hospital sits just out of sight. There's something watching from around those darkened corners that I don't remember how to see. It wanted me to close my eyes and collapse. It begged me to, and my only answer was in the tip of my finger. I don't know what would have happened if I'd let it put me to sleep. I think I came in too late for it to sink in like it did for everyone else. I think the scars on my leg are worth a lot. I groped further down the hall, stumbling past fallen bodies with one finger in my ear and the other in my leg. His room was just ahead of me now. It smelt like blood. It mixed with the copper stench of my dripping leg, and I ran the last few steps to the room. I hit the door and slipped. It was blood, pooling and crumpling my back against the slick tile as I landed. My head snapped up, and there he was. He was harrowing. The moonlight bathed him, and I saw he was again arched over his bed, his back achingly curled, almost perfectly still. His teeth brushed his pillow, and his spit pulled. His mouth distended in silent pain, and his arm was moving. It trembled forward, shaking, leading up to his hand. There it glowed, split, flopping from the tip of his middle finger were the remnants flaps of his skin, glistening with strands of red between them. Under them, the fingers of his other hand, their own skin beginning to split as he pushed, ever pushed the ring, that ring, of course, up and out, through the skin, twisting, tearing the skin, anything to push it off, and finally off. He moved and he bled profusely, unbearably, but he moved in his unconsciousness to make something happen, to fight back. I ran my hands all over the bloody floor as he slowly, slowly pushed, decoupling the skin from flesh, working it forward and through. The ring was bright as it carved. There must be something. There must have been something that I couldn't see about the ring. Something I couldn't understand. It bit at me, and I lunged against his soaking bed, throwing him against the wall, undoing his petrified arch, snapping his body limp as I wrestled with his gushing hands. The ring was dangling now, a centimetre of flesh and bone remaining in contact with it, sticking to the pink flaps of flesh now drooping over the tip. I gave it the extra pull. I tore away the skin and took my teeth to it. I tasted sickly metal, and only then did it come loose. The sudden release put me on my back again, and I writhed with the seconds of thought I had left. I twisted the scraps of flesh between my teeth. The weight pressed in again, so strong, and I watched the ring spin red against the tile as I left at last. I know his eyes never opened. I was so afraid of what I would see when mine closed. I guess my worst thing isn't much in the end. Anyone who spends enough time in a hospital has seen flesh tear and blood spill. Really, it was him. It was what he saw. I saw something awful. He bore witness. He knew what I could only feel. There's not much left. We woke up. He was dead, incredibly so. Whatever he saw has no longer hold on him. I have to dream. The ring was long gone when I came to in my own hospital bed. We were all reeling, some in ways that they never truly could make peace with. They all saw something, and they all forgot enough pieces of it to live. Many diagnosed instances of brain damage came from that day, but we lived, and we all had questions. There had been a tragic accident. Certain gases had been building in the air, affecting our emotional regulation. That led to a sudden, spontaneous bodily reaction that knocked most of us out and killed many of our aging, weakened patients. It was a beautiful answer to square away what lingered. An excuse. I couldn't look at my co-workers much after. I always saw how we had been to each other before, and it pushed me away from that hospital for good. I wanted to believe with them. I want the presence I felt with that pen in my hand and those heart monitors singing to just be gas in my head. But it's there, right where I don't remember how to see it. Sleep doesn't comfort me like it used to. Now I begin to dream. I dig into my leg until I wake. And then I wonder. I wonder if it will be back when I close my eyes. If a stranger will visit me while I sleep. If I'll ever wake to feel something tight and warm on my finger. If I'll wake up at all.